what's in my unit right there. That's... All right. Now that all the wise people have left the room, if you will, turn in your Bibles to Mark chapter 2, and we are going to continue our journey through the Gospel of Mark. We're going to pick up the end of chapter 2 and the beginning of chapter 3. If you remember from last week, Jesus was confronted because his disciples didn't fast, either the same way or the same times that some of the other religious people did, particularly the Pharisees. Well, today Jesus is going to be confronted because of the activities that he and his disciples do on the Sabbath day. And Mark has been so kind to put these two different events right next to each other to bring up a point. Of course, one of the main points Mark is giving throughout these whole first several chapters is that Jesus is in charge of everything. Jesus has authority over demons, over the law, over disease. We're going to see later, even over death. Jesus has authority over all things, and he says here, he is even Lord of the Sabbath. So hopefully we'll learn a little more about Jesus and a little bit about ourselves. But let's start with the first of these two stories in Mark 2, beginning in verse 23 and going to the end of the chapter. It says, one Sabbath, Jesus was going through the grain fields, and as his disciples walked along, they began to pick some heads of grain. The Pharisees said to Jesus, "Look, why are they doing what is unlawful on the Sabbath?" And Jesus answered, "Have you never read what David did when he and his companions were hungry and in need? In the days of Abiathar the high priest, he entered the house of God and ate the consecrated bread, which is lawful only for priests to eat. And he also gave some to his companions. Then Jesus said to them, 'The Sabbath was made for man, not man for the Sabbath. So the Son of Man is Lord even of the Sabbath.'" Now you may have recognized over the last 2 years, I am not born country. And so I had to go inquire about these heads of grain. Because we don't have them in my concrete jungle. And so the story goes, Jesus and his disciples are walking through a field, not their field. This is fine, we'll talk about that in a minute. They're walking through a field, and the disciples go and they pluck a head of grain, and you got nasty stuff on it that you don't want to eat called the husk and apparently the beard. And so they would take it in their hands. Matthew, Mark, and Luke all talk about this story. And so any details you didn't see in Mark, I'm going to give them to you from Matthew and Luke. But I think Luke tells us that they took them in their hands and they rolled them and got the husk off so that they could eat it. And then the Pharisees go, "Aha, we have caught them. They have done what is unlawful to do." And I'm kind of wondering what that's all about. So it might be helpful to go get some Old Testament context. What is the law about the Sabbath? And I'll just tell you, there's a lot in the Old Testament about the Sabbath. It turns out it was kind of an important thing. It was one of the top 10 rules. If you're in Exodus chapter 20, the 10 Commandments, it's one of the 10 Commandments. Here's Exodus 20, beginning in verse 8. It says, "Remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy," that is, to have it set apart as a special day. 6 days you shall labor and do all your work, but the seventh day is a Sabbath to the Lord your God. On it you shall not do any work, you, your son, your daughter, your male servant, your female servant, your livestock, or the sojourner who is within your gates. Nobody is supposed to do work on the Sabbath. Now remember, this is Saturday. That's the Jewish Sabbath day. If you know Spanish, that makes a lot more sense to you. But they're not supposed to do any work. Now, the easy part to understand is, okay, there's a special day. The hard part to understand is what exactly is work? What counts as work? What doesn't count as work? I mean, it's kind of hard to put pants on in the morning. Is that work? I understand maybe I shouldn't do my regular job, but exactly how far does this go, knowing that the Pharisees say, if you pluck and you roll, you have worked today? I don't know if any farmer would say that. Yep, I went out to the field, I checked one grain, I nibbled on it, I'm going home. But that's what is being used here, so maybe we need a little more context. In Isaiah 58, verse 13, we get a little bit more about what I believe is the heart of the Sabbath. It says in Isaiah 58:13, if you turn back your foot from the Sabbath. That's a weird phrase that basically means if you avoid working on the Sabbath. That's the heart of that phrase. Some of your translations will be a little bit more gentle to you in that one. But if you avoid doing work on the Sabbath, basically, if you avoid doing your pleasure on my holy day and call the Sabbath a delight and the holy day of the Lord honorable, if you honor it, not going your own ways or seeking your own pleasure or talking idly, and then verse 14 begins with, you will experience the joy of the Lord. So there's things here to avoid, right? Don't make the holy day all about you. Right? Don't go off and do your own thing. Don't go off and seek your own pleasures. Today, I want it to be about God. That's the heart of the Sabbath day. And the little extra there for Baptist is no talking idly. So make sure that your talk is honorable as well as your actions on the Lord's day. So some of us got to repent already because we've gone too far. But that's the heart of the law, is that we're going to make today about God. So I'm not going to do my own regular work. I'm going to make it about God. I'm not going to talk about maybe the things I would have talked about. I'm going to honor the Lord in everything I do on this specific day. And apparently the Pharisees thought the disciples had missed that. So here's the restrictive quality of the law, is you're not supposed to go do your own thing, roughly. And so here we are in Mark 2:23. They're out in a field, and his disciples walk along. They pluck, they roll, they eat, and the Pharisees say, look, they are doing what is unlawful on the Sabbath. Now I want to be clear. I don't want to misrepresent the Pharisees. This isn't about stealing, right? Read it through 21st century glasses. You mean they walked through some other guy's field and started eating some other guy's food? That wasn't what was going on. What they were doing was completely acceptable. In fact, it was in the law. Here's Deuteronomy 23, just so we're clear that the disciples weren't doing anything intrinsically wrong. If you go into your neighbor's standing grain, which is what they were doing, you may pluck the ears with your hand, but you shall not put a sickle to your neighbor's standing grain. So what they were doing was fine, right? I mean, you go into someone's field, snap, roll, eat, that's not a big deal. That's not what the Pharisees were mad about. In case you're curious, this was a law that God set up to help poor people. When you were going to harvest your grain, you were only allowed to go through your field one time. Anything you missed, you left. By law, you left it for the people who don't have fields to harvest. They can go in and they can pluck with their hand. Now, don't go take a sickle and reap everything that they missed and go sell it for a profit, but you're welcome to grab what you need to eat for that day. That's a law God set up for the poor. All of this to say, what the disciples did was not wrong in terms of stealing. The Pharisees are accusing them of doing work. Not stealing, but doing work. Which begs the question, am I allowed to do anything on the Sabbath day? I understand maybe I'm not supposed to go harvest with a sickle, but am I allowed to do anything on the Sabbath day? And the answer is, well, yes. Actually, there's a lot of people doing a lot of work in Israel on the Sabbath day. I'll pull a couple of examples. Here's Psalm 92. Seems appropriate because it's called a psalm, a song for the Sabbath. This is a song that we're going to sing on the Sabbath day. It is good to give thanks to the Lord, to sing praises to your name, O Most High, to declare your steadfast love in the morning and your faithfulness by night, to the music of the lute and the harp, to the melody of the lyre. That's not someone who's fibbing, that's a different instrument. For you, O Lord, have made me glad by your work. At the works of your hands I sing for joy. And so I want to pull out, there are two things at least in here that you're allowed to do on the Sabbath. You are welcome to sing. And if you're someone like Roger, you did work up here. You were leading the worship. I didn't mean it was strenuous, but you were leading the worship. You were doing work, and this says that's good. It is good to lead us in singing on the Sabbath. I would never even entertain the thought that what Pat does on the piano wasn't work. Now, she makes it look easy, but that came from years of practice, years of training, and she put forth effort today. You worked And Psalm 92 says that's a good thing to do. It is good to do that work on the Sabbath. And don't even get me started about the priests. The priests are going to be very busy. Just one example. I had like 10, and I thought that might take us over. So here's Numbers 28. It says, on the Sabbath day, and it talks about sacrifices. There's 2 male lambs, a year old without blemish, and 2/10 of an ephah of fine flour for a grain offering, mixed with oil, and its drink offering. This is the burnt offering of every Sabbath, besides the regular burnt offering and its drink offering. Earlier in that chapter, it says every day the priests are going to make these sacrifices, but on the Sabbath day, they're going to do more. Well, we're going to do lots of work. In fact, some of the priests are bakers, and they bake 12 loaves of bread, and it's called the show bread, and they put it on the golden tables, and it stays there, and the priests are ultimately going to eat it, but it was baked for God on the Sabbath. So the priests are busy doing work. So what's the difference? If the law says don't work, but then the law says unless you're a priest, then you're going to do a whole lot of work, what's the difference in those types of work? See, Mark doesn't bring this out, but Matthew does. Matthew's the more Jewish gospel. And so Matthew actually tells us a little bit more of what Jesus said in this event. And if your Bible has little notes in it, it'll tell you, you can read this story in Matthew 12, Luke 6, and here in Mark 2. But in Matthew 12:5, Jesus says these words also, or have you not read? I could probably go up to one of you and say, are you familiar with Leviticus chapter 24? And you might say, it's been a while. 20 years or so, maybe, I don't know. But a Pharisee knows the law like the back of his hand. For Jesus to say, have you not read? That stings. That's a scholar in his field. And Jesus goes, well, are you not familiar with the law? I mean, I thought that was kind of your job. Have you not read in the law how on the Sabbath the priests in the temple profane the Sabbath and are guiltless? Haven't you read about all the laws where the priests are supposed to be doing all of this work when you're not supposed to do work? Have you not understood that don't work does not mean you're not going to do anything? There's lots of work happening on the Sabbath. It's just not work for you. It's work for God. You are welcome to sing. You are welcome to play your instrument. You are welcome, I hope, to preach and teach from the Bible on the Sabbath. It's good for the priests to make sacrifices on the Sabbath. There's plenty of work to be done, just not work for you. And the question being brought up is, so is what the disciples did with the pluck and the roll and the eat, did they break the law of the Sabbath? Did they work? The Pharisees say yes. But the reason the Pharisees say yes is because they just add all kinds of rules to this thing. Right? Jesus, or God in Exodus 20 wasn't particularly specific, and so the Pharisees got specific. No, you cannot even pluck it with your hand. You can't even run. Nope, you worked today. And Jesus says, are you sure? Is that really work? I mean, let's be fair, because there's a lot of people doing a lot of work on the Sabbath, and it's good. I think you might have missed the boat. And so in our text in Mark 2, beginning in verse 25, Jesus gives his answer. He says, have you never read what David did when he and his companions were hungry and in need? In the days of Abiathar the high priest, he entered the house of God and ate the consecrated bread, which is lawful only for the priests to eat, and he also gave some to his companions. Of course, he's pointing you to an Old Testament passage where David's running for his life because Saul wants to kill him. Kind of a normal thing. That relationship was very love-hate. David loved him, Saul there we go. Saul hated him. And so David is running for his life, he and his band of misfits, and they're hungry. So they go to the town where the tabernacle is, because it's not a temple yet, it's a movable tent. And David goes up to the priest and goes, is there any food that we can have? We're starving. And the priest that he's talking to says, all I have is the showbread. All I have are those 12 loaves that we make for God. That's all the food I've got. And the priest gives the food to David. David gives the food to his men. And Jesus is pointing us to that story. Why? Don't you love it when Jesus doesn't explain the why? And so we're kind of left open for interpretation. I think it could be a little bit of any of these things. Jesus does seem to be drawing a parallel between he and the disciples and David and his band of misfits. So good to know if you're a disciple, you're just one of the misfits. It's good. He may be pointing out the fact that the priest freely gave of what belonged to him on the Sabbath. And if David was traveling on that day and taking the bread and giving it to his disciples on that day, then he was doing work. Was that wrong? It doesn't even say in the Old Testament whether it was wrong or not, just that it happened. And now Jesus is bringing up this story here. And Jesus is saying, well, is it wrong? If you're starving, is it wrong to eat on the Sabbath day? Even if you have to go get that food, as David did with his men? And Jesus is going to have another story at the beginning of chapter 3, and the main point seems to be this. It is good to do good on the Sabbath. What the priest did for David back there in the Old Testament was good. He didn't have to. The bread belonged to the priests. But he did it anyway, because it's good to do good on the Sabbath. And it's not wrong for you to make a snack. Now, you're not supposed to be cooking and doing things like normal because the day is special. But man, if you're starving, don't die because it's the Sabbath. It is good to do good on the Sabbath. And we have another story here at the beginning of chapter 3 that will say roughly the same thing. Although it might help if I hit the last verse of chapter 2, because Jesus said something else. Then Jesus said to these Pharisees, who apparently are just following them around in the field looking for a reason to get mad at them. I don't know why else you're going to, they're walking through the field. Let's see if they do anything dumb. But then Jesus said to them, the Sabbath was made for man, not man for the Sabbath. So which came first, the chicken or the egg? If you ever get asked, it's chicken. It's got to be the chicken. There's no two ways about it. But the real question is, which came first, man or the law? Adam and Eve came before Moses and the law. The law was not made first and then man was made so they can follow a bunch of rules. The rules were given after their creation to help them. The law was made to help man. The Sabbath was made to help man. God didn't make you just so that you could follow a bunch of rules. He made you for a purpose, and the rules are there to help you fulfill that purpose. Jesus says, don't you understand that the law is here for your benefit? You're not here for the benefit of the law. By the way, I'm the author. And so I don't have to follow the extra rules you made up. I will follow the rules I made, because I thought about them a lot harder than you did. But I don't have to follow your made up rules. He says at the end of chapter 2, so the Son of Man is Lord, even of the Sabbath. Now I love the word even there. You know what that means? I'm Lord of a whole lot more than that. But I am also Lord of the Sabbath. So Jesus calls himself the Son of Man. Again, he calls himself the Lord of the law. Turns out he's just telling them, I'm God, and I'm going to do what's right. And if I don't do what you tell me to do, it's because what you told me to do isn't right. Now let's go into chapter 3. Another time, Jesus went into the synagogue, and a man with a shriveled hand was there. You would assume this is the Sabbath day, otherwise there wouldn't be people gathering at the synagogue. Verse 2, some of them were looking for a reason to accuse Jesus, so they watched him closely to see if he would heal on the Sabbath. Can we just take a step back for a moment? If Jesus does a miracle on the Sabbath, and you think that is a good way to get him in trouble, where is your heart at right now? Boy, I hope that Jesus does a miracle from God so that we can say he's a loser. But that's what they're aiming for. Verse 3, Jesus said to the man with the shriveled hand, what every Baptist is afraid of, stand up and come to the front. It's like pulling teeth to get deacons up here. But he says, this poor man with the disability, stand up in front of everybody. I want you to see this man with the shriveled hand. All right, it's clear. His problem is now clear for everybody. Not that they didn't know. But this problem is now clear for everybody because the rabbi is about to teach a lesson. Jesus is a traveling rabbi. That's why it's appropriate for him to teach in the synagogue. And he is going to teach a lesson right here for the Pharisees and for you and me today. And in verse 4, Jesus asked those who want to find fault with him, which is lawful on the Sabbath, to do good or to do evil, to save life or to kill? Now that question rings a little weird. What's he talking about? Good, evil, save or kill. And what he's actually doing, he's expressing the heart of the Pharisee. What is the Pharisee hoping for in this situation? To find an excuse to get Jesus. So the Pharisees' heart on the Sabbath is they want to get Jesus. Jesus' heart on the Sabbath is I want to help this man. And so he's contrasting himself with the Pharisees, which is appropriate on the Sabbath day, to desire good or to desire evil, to desire healing or to desire murder. Which one is it? Oh, but in Matthew's gospel, again, it's a little more Jewish. And there's more to this that we won't catch as 21st century American Christians. In Matthew 12, verse 11, which is the same event, Jesus said to them, which one of you who has a sheep, if it falls into a pit on the Sabbath, will not take hold of it and lift it out? Again, it just sounds like a question. Okay, so I'm not supposed to do any work. I got some sheep. What if one of them falls in a hole on Saturday? Am I supposed to just leave it to die? Because if I picked it up, I would be carrying a burden. I'd be doing work. And I'm not supposed to. Jeremiah made that. There's a quote in Jeremiah about not carrying a burden on the Sabbath. I didn't pull that quote out, but it's in there. You're welcome to read the whole book until you find it. And so the question is, can I carry this burden or do I leave the sheep to die? And so the Pharisees had added another rule. Jesus is addressing the Pharisees' added rule here. And so they say, you're not allowed to work. You can't pluck grain and do this. That's wrong. Oh, but if a sheep falls into a hole, you can pick it up. So they have this rule that you can carry that burden in that specific circumstance. You are allowed to rescue the sheep so that it doesn't die. That's the law that the Pharisees added to the scriptures. You're not going to find it in the scriptures, but they added it to it. Jesus is addressing that law in particular. And essentially he's saying this. So you're telling me that on the Sabbath day, I can pick up a sheep and that's good, but I cannot perform a miracle and heal this man, that's bad. You're telling me that a sheep is more important than a person. What are you, PETA? That's not how this is supposed to work. Human beings are made in God's image. Sheep are made for clothes and dinner. There's a difference. But the law that the Pharisees have added makes it as if a sheep is more important than a human. Jesus goes, really? Is that what you think? You who want to get me, is that what you think? That a sheep is more important than a human being? Because you'll tell me that this is okay, because you made that law. But you're going to tell me healing this man is not okay. And so in both situations, in the conversation that we see in Matthew and the conversation that we see in Mark, the core is the same. Where is your heart? Where is your desire to love? Don't you understand that the Sabbath is made for you? That the Sabbath is a day to do good, not evil, but you want to kill me. You really want to go that route. And so we'll look at Mark 3 again. Jesus' words in verse 4, which is lawful on the Sabbath, to do good or to do evil, to save life or to kill, but they remain silent. And you can understand why, right? That they try to trap Jesus, but Jesus has turned the tables on them and now he's trapped them. Well, am I supposed to do good or do evil? Well, if I say that he's supposed to do good, then he should do the miracle and not get in trouble for it. But I can't say we're supposed to do evil on the Sabbath. It's God's holy day. I'm stuck. I can't win in any of these situations. I'm stuck. I can't win. So they remained silent. And Jesus in verse 5 looked around at them in anger and deeply distressed at their stubborn hearts. He said to the man, stretch out your hand. He stretched it out and his hand was completely restored. So Jesus has done a miracle on the Sabbath day. What does that tell you? Apparently God has got to be with him. At the very least, God is in agreement with what Jesus has said. Do you do good or do you do evil? I believe God says we should do good. And Jesus would know because he is God. He says, fine, I'm going to do good. Since you won't listen, because what is the appropriate response here? Say I'm sorry. That is the appropriate response. The Pharisees wanted to kill somebody on the Sabbath. If you remember Matthew chapter 7, they are so busy trying to find any speck in the eye of Jesus, they have ignored the tree lodged into their eye. Remember, Matthew 7 doesn't say don't judge, it says don't judge hypocritically. Right? If you can remember and understand that you are a sinner saved by grace, if you can look in the mirror and judge yourself first and recognize just how imperfect you are, then you are in a better position to help your brothers and sisters deal with the specks in their eyes. It's not that we ignore all problems at all times. Just don't be a hypocrite. Don't be trying to catch them, trying to find ways to harm them like the Pharisees are doing here. And they've completely missed the boat. The appropriate response for this Pharisee, after Jesus says, you're being a hypocrite, and then Jesus performs a miracle, is to say, I was being a hypocrite. I am sorry. See, that happens sometimes. It hadn't happened here, and I'm so thankful. I don't know, you guys have steel-toed boots or something. But what Jesus is doing as the rabbi, he's basically standing up, he's giving a sermon, and he is stomping on the toes of the congregation. When that happens, what do? Do you get mad at the preacher who is giving that from the Word of God? Or do you say, ow, I am so sorry you had to step on my toes. I am so sorry that I was doing exactly what the Bible said that I was doing. I'm so sorry for being a Pharisee. Because we are so good at being Pharisees. It is so easy to do. And this, I'm talking from universal here, the church, particularly in America, sometime starting in the 50s, we said, you got to dress up like I'm dressed right now if you want to come to church. And if you don't have your slacks, if you don't have your tie, if you don't got your penny loafers, then you're doing it wrong, and you are less of a Christian than I am because I wore my tie. And I just don't remember the part of the law that said, thou shalt not wear denim. And I don't remember the part of the law that said, thou shalt wear a tie. Thou shalt not wear shorts or sandals. I find that last part really interesting because Jesus probably wore sandals. But we add these extra rules and say, if you don't do what I do, I'm a better Christian than you. And if we want to give a similar example, did you know? I mean, you're here at 11 o'clock, so you knew that much. Did you know at 10 o'clock, we have Sunday school? I love Sunday school. Sunday school is a great opportunity for you to get into a group of Christians and ask questions. Because I tell you, I don't know what I would do if you started asking me questions in the middle of the sermon, like in this format. Like, this isn't the time for that. But Sunday school is a great opportunity for you to ask questions and get clarity in the scriptures. And so I would love for you to come to Sunday school. Did you know? At 9 a.m., there's a men's prayer time. And there can't be anything better than for men to gather together and pray over the needs of the church. To lift up all of us in prayer and ask for healing, ask for wisdom, ask for growth, ask for discernment, ask for all of these things. That's great. I love the prayer time. Did you know? At 6 p.m., we've got another service right here where we can lift up praises to the Lord, lift up our requests to Him, and study His Word some more. We even got something over there. Now, I say all of that and I think he's trying to step on my toes. Actually, I'm stepping on everyone else's toes. So if you felt like your toes were stepped on, it wasn't for you. Is there anything that says you have to come at 9 o'clock? That you have to come at 10 o'clock? That you have to come back at 6 o'clock? Am I supposed to try to make you feel like less of a Christian because you did not do all of the things that are being offered? But we do. We sure do try to guilt you into doing all kinds of stuff. That's what the Pharisees were doing. They were trying to guilt people into thinking that they had done sin because they plucked a head of grain, or trying to guilt Jesus, that's a fool's errand to try to convince God of anything other than the truth. But they try to make Jesus feel guilty for doing a miracle at church. And Jesus is saying, I'm not going to have any of this. And I'm going to step on your toes about it. You hypocrite. You who want to get me instead of wanting to love. You have missed the point entirely. And in verse 6, when Jesus had performed that miracle, then the Pharisees went out and began to plot with the Herodians how they might kill Jesus. Herodians would be the Jews that have aligned with Rome. Herod, the king that Rome put over Israel. So the Herodians are the Jewish people who are aligned with Rome. Pharisees hate Rome. You can kind of understand why. But the Pharisees hate Rome. But what this verse is telling us is they hate Jesus more. The enemy of my enemy is my friend is basically what this verse is saying. The Pharisees hated Jesus so much that they would join forces with people that they hated in order to get at Jesus. Where is their heart at? And that's what Jesus is saying the whole time. So Mark is telling us here in these passages that Jesus is Lord of everything. He's Lord of the Sabbath. He's Lord over your made-up traditions. But the warning that we have here is that we need to be very careful not to be the Pharisees. Not to try to get people and to make up these extra rules and try to make people feel guilty because they aren't doing the things we made up for them to do. We need to be very careful that we are not making disciples of Robert Lee Baptist Church, but instead we are making disciples of Jesus Christ and teaching them to obey what he commanded, not just what we command. Let's pray together.